Open your phone right now and count. Contacts, followers, group chats, coworkers, old classmates you haven't spoken to in a decade but somehow still know. The number is probably in the hundreds, maybe thousands. And yet, if you had to call someone at 3 a.m. because everything was falling apart, the number of people you'd actually call probably fits on one hand. That gap between how many people you're technically connected to and how many you can actually hold in your head as real, meaningful relationships isn't a personal failure. It's not that you're bad at friendship. It's that your brain was handed a hard biological ceiling hundreds of thousands of years ago, and nobody ever told you it exists. In the early 1990s, British anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar, then at University College London, noticed something strange while studying primates. Across dozens of primate species, he found a consistent relationship. The bigger a species' neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex thought, planning, and social reasoning, the larger the social groups that species could maintain. Chimpanzees, with a certain neocortex ratio, tended to live in groups of around 50. Species with smaller neocortices maintained smaller groups. Dunbar built a mathematical model from this relationship, and then did something bold. He plugged human brain size into it and extrapolated forward. The number his model produced, published in a 1992 paper, was approximately 150. Not a round number picked for convenience. A number that fell directly out of the ratio between human neocortex size and the cognitive cost of tracking a social relationship. Dunbar's number isn't about how many people you can recognize or wave to. It's specifically the number of relationships your brain can maintain where you know who each person is, how they relate to everyone else in your life, and what the current state of that relationship is. Dunbar described this in layers, like concentric circles. At the center, roughly 5 people, the ones you'd turn to in an actual crisis. Around them, about 15 close friends. Around that, roughly 50 people you'd call friends, but see less often. And at the outermost meaningful layer, approximately 150 the people whose lives you could roughly describe, whose relationships to each other you understand, who you'd recognize showing up uninvited to your door and know why they were there. Past that boundary, Dunbar argued, people become acquaintances, categories, names you recognize without the social context to back them up. Here's where it gets strange, because once Dunbar proposed this number, people started finding it everywhere they looked, in places that had no idea they were confirming a psychological limit. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer bands found that traditional societies across wildly different continents and eras tended to split into new villages once population passed somewhere around 150. The Hutterites, a communal farming group with a well-documented internal tradition, have a long-standing practice of deliberately splitting a colony into two the moment it approaches 150 members, because their own leaders had observed that cohesion and cooperation started breaking down past that point decades before anyone had heard of Robin Dunbar. Some historians researching Roman military organization have pointed out that the basic unit of the Roman army, the century, nominally numbered around 100, later closer to 80, but functioned within a broader command structure clustering near the same range small enough that soldiers could track relationships and loyalties without a formal chain of command doing it for them. None of these groups were trying to prove a theory. They kept independently rediscovering the same ceiling, because the ceiling was never really about culture. It was about the processing limit sitting inside every one of their skulls. Here's where this stops being a story about ancient tribes and Roman soldiers. For the overwhelming majority of human history, 150 was also roughly the maximum number of people you would ever meet in your entire life. Small bands, small villages, small worlds. Your social brain evolved to handle exactly the number of relationships your entire lived experience could ever produce. Then, within the last 2 decades, something happened that your neocortex has no evolutionary answer for. Social platforms made it possible to be connected to thousands of people simultaneously, a scale of apparent social contact that exceeds anything a human brain has ever been asked to track, by an order of magnitude our ancestors never once encountered. Your brain didn't get a firmware update. It's still running the same 150-person operating system it was issued hundreds of thousands of years ago, except now it's being asked to process a friend list, a follower count, and a group chat that all vastly exceed what it was built to hold as real. This is very possibly one of the real, physical reasons hyperconnected people still report feeling profoundly lonely. It's not a contradiction. It's a capacity problem. You can be visible to 1,000 people and known by none of them in the way your brain actually defines knowing someone, and some part of you feels that gap constantly, even when you can't name it. The number of people you can genuinely hold in your head as real, 3-dimensional relationships was never going to be limitless. It was capped, quietly, by the same brain that let our ancestors survive predators, winters, and each other. You are not failing at connection because you have too few relationships. You may simply be trying to hold more than any human brain in history was ever asked to carry, spread thin across a number your ancestors never had to imagine. 150 was never a small number. For most of human history, it was everyone you would ever know. You just have more names now, not more people.